My guest today has spent decades observing patients in every stage of later life, and what renowned gerontologist Dr. Kerry Burnight observed intrigued her, because among the mix of patients she saw were people who were the picture of physical health, the biohackers of their day, who often didn't go on to live longer than average lives. And yet she saw others, perhaps with less perfect regimens, who did live significantly longer. What she saw time and time again in those who didn't go on to have the long, healthy life they hoped for wasn't just down to lifestyle, but often involved their approach to life.
I want to make sure that your listeners recognize what gets better as you get older.
Dr. Kerry captured these insights in her transformative book, Joyspan. She argues that joy isn't just a nice to have, it is the essential fuel that gives us the strength, connection, and purpose to not only reach a long life, but to make it worth living.
I don't want people to spend the next 40 years suffering.
She's here today to discuss what she observed, the steps we can all start taking today to support our own joy span, and the wisdom she has gathered and so beautifully shares alongside her 97-year-old mother, Betty, on social media.
If we all do this, we are changing the face of aging and what it means to step into our long lives. That's pretty exciting. It feels kind of like being a part of a revolution.
If you're looking for that extra spark of inspiration, this conversation is bound to ignite it. Dr. Kerry, I have so been looking forward to this conversation and to a much needed injection of joy in these times. So thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I want to start with what it was that you observed about how most of us approach aging that inspired you to write your brilliant book, Joyspan.
Oh, well, I love being a gerontologist. And so for about 35 years, I have had this front row seat to watching people and their families age. And I get to work with people in their 80s and 90s and 100s. And I kept seeing a pattern. And the pattern was that at younger ages, and by younger, as a gerontologist, I mean in our 50s and 60s and 70s, you think, oh, well, if I simply just do X, Y, and Z physically, I'll somehow never age and nothing will ever go wrong. And then those same people who have done all the things also have changes and do age and do ultimately die. So I just had this strong conviction, and I still have it, that in addition to having longer lives, in addition to being healthy and strong physically and cognitively, we need to put as much attention to our internal lives and to the quality of our long lives, because you don't stay forever young and you don't somehow avoid death. And so I just wanted to jump in and say, let's get older. Let's make it safe to age, but in a way that's about dignity and purpose and love and connection, and then most of all, joy.
You have really hit on something, because on social media in particular, we do live in the age of the biohacker, and I quite commonly see people almost in age denial, and the purpose being not to age. They are going to outpace aging, and they have a very tough regimen that they share with us, all the things they take and all the gadgets they're wired up to, and this is the thing that's going to propel them through life without aging. And there is always a sense of a lack of joy in that regimen, and we perhaps haven't seen publicly the end point of this kind of extreme biohacking approach, but it sounds like in your work you have seen some element of that, with people coming to you, don't you worry, I'm outrunning it. What does that look like when in those conversations that you've had?
I love that question, and nobody asks that, and so I'm happy to highlight this. There are different trends that happen, and then everyone like jumps on the trend, and it usually involves spending our money to do these things. But when you're in it for long enough, you watch. And so the example that I give, probably now 25 years ago, there was the trend of caloric restriction. We called it CR,
Yes.
and it was simply, eating is taxing on the body. Just eat as little tiny as possible, and
Mm.
then you'll live so long. And the leaders of caloric restriction were a husband and wife team, great people, didn't eat hardly a thing. And he passed away, like, in his early 70s. And when he
Mm.
passed away, I thought, oh my goodness, he was probably so hungry also. And it
Yeah.
wasn't related to his caloric restriction, but I just thought we're missing our lives when we are in denial that our time is limited. So it's the one thing I can assure you, that we will all die, and that is not a failure. It is not bad. It's not even a tragedy, because if you really think about it, we couldn't have all of us alive at the same time. And
Yeah.
our goal to be, 120, I mean, it's not realistic, and it's not real. So anyway, all these biohack kinds of things, it's not that I'm like blanket statement against them. I mean, but it's that I have watched too many people miss the joy and the being fully present in their life by being in denial of the limited time that we have here, and the fact that aging is natural, and that we've been fed this big lie that it's all decline, and the research simply does not support that.
I wonder, what are the roots of joy in your view? Where can joy be found?
Yeah, well, let's define it first.
Uh-huh.
So joy and happiness are also often used interchangeably, as if they're the same thing. But I was really inspired by the work of the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, from the Catholic faith, coupled with the work of the Dalai Lama, from the Buddhist faith. And actually these two brilliant men were joined together by a man who was Jewish. So it was like these faiths coming together. And they talk about how joy and happiness are in fact different. And it was a light bulb moment for me. So happiness, nothing wrong with it, but happiness is often externally dependent. So this good thing happens, happy, and then,
Mm-hmm.
oh, get some terrible news, not happy, and it up and so it goes. Whereas joy is from the inside out. So joy we can think of as more akin to contentment.
Mm-hmm.
Joy is like, you can think of it in the same way that the sun is still there even on a cloudy day. It's just that you can't see it. Joy, because it's in the inside, and it can exist even with challenge. And so I love it for aging, because there are challenges. And in addition to knowing that we're for sure going to die, I also can say that in almost every life I've ever worked with, there has been some very hard things, losing your
Mm.
partner and having a chronic condition that causes pain, having an acute diagnosis, having things, diagnoses with our children and our grandchildren. There's a lot there. So joy is well-being, contentment, kind of a psychological satisfaction that can be maintained even in hard times. And I did a lot of research, like, well, what are the elements of
Mm.
joy? Why is it that I have two patients? They're both 84. They both have the same socioeconomic status. They both have the same medical conditions. They both have the same so and so and so on the outside. And yet one is absolutely thriving, and we can't wait to be around that person. The other person is utterly miserable, and we can't wait to get away from that person. So
Mm.
what I found is, and we can go into it, is that there were four non-negotiables that the research and lived experience shows us that by working on these things in the same way that we work on our physical bodies, by working on these things, we can actually increase our ability to access our inner joy that was here all along.
Tell me those four.
Okay, I will. And I wish that I had this snappy acronym that I could just say a word and that would be it. But I ended up just using the words that the research showed me. But there is a
Yep.
way to remember it. So it
Okay.
starts with a G and ends with a G. So we got that. And then in the middle are the letters C and A. So G, C, A, G. So now your listeners have kind of a baseline to think, okay, these are the four. They're all verbs. And the reason that they're all verbs is because they take effort. So in the same way that we lift heavy weights in order to grow stronger, we engage in these four research-based practices in order to grow our joy, aka resilience, fulfillment, well-being, whatever sits the best with you. So the first, the G, is growth. The research shows that people who continue to grow in terms of self-development throughout life are people who are able to enjoy their long lives. And the grow, it could be things like, for example, learning guitar, but it can also be internal. I have a patient right now who is over 100. She's quite contracted and she's confined to bed, but what she decided for her grow was that she was going to become the best possible listener. She listened to TED Talks about listening. She listened to an Audible about listening. And now whenever I go to visit her in the care home that she lives in, people are gathered around sharing with her because they feel so seen and so listened to. And as I walked in there, it made me realize I could be a better listener. And wouldn't that be a wonderful legacy to leave, that if I worked on my ability to listen? So I thought that was a nice example that we could do.
That's so beautiful because it's like, at that very late stage, she's still looking for purpose and finding it.
Yes.
It's a beautiful thing, really, because you think, well, by the age of 100 and you're in the care home, it's just other people helping you, but she has sought out a way to help others, which is a
Yeah,
lovely thing.
it is. And it's so great because she experiences great joy, what I call Joyspan. And the people around her so benefit from her. So it's such a win-win. So our fifth one is to think, how am I growing? How am I doing hard things, things that I'm maybe not great at, to kind of be a beginner again? And that can start with curiosity. What am I a little bit curious about? And I wrote a book called Joyspan, and in the chapter on growth, I list out a lot of areas to get people thinking, what am I curious about? Because that's going to be different for everyone. And if you have older parents, as you and I do, with my older mother, I was able to say, okay, now that you're 97, what are you still curious about? And her first response was nothing. And I said, well, wait. And then I started reading off a list of about 50 things. And well, yes, I am a little interested in that. I'm a little interested in that. And once you find something you're curious about, there are other people who also are curious about that. And there's so many ways we can explore these curiosities, which leads to growth, which ultimately increases your joy span. So we're done with the first one. You've got your
That's
G.
grow. Got it. Growth. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's go to our second one, and you will know right away what letter it's going to be, which is C. And that C stands for connect. And connect has to do with the research showing that one of the greatest, if not the single greatest predictor of enjoying your 100-year life is the quality of your connection with other humans. And with other animals too. There's not as much research, but I was just with my 2 golden retrievers, so I wanted to add that. But with humans, if we just think, well, I have these friends, I've always had this group, with long lives, we can't kind of rest on our oars like that because we often outlive our friends or our friends move away or maybe they're living with extensive cognitive impairment.
Mm.
So people who are able to connect all lifelong or people who have been proactive in cultivating relationships throughout life and also making what I call diversifying your social portfolio. So, just in the same way that we have this financial portfolio that we're supposed to diversify with our social portfolio, it's a matter of taking inventory and saying, I am not very close with those mothers that I used to see all the time. Uh,
Yes.
and like my mom at 97, she outlived all her friends. So luckily, I read this research, about 30 years ago, and I said, Mom, I think you need to invest in some younger friends as well as your longtime friends. So she has a group of women that she calls the youngs who are in their 70s, and she invites them over, and the youngs love to be the youngs, and they love to learn from my mother, and my mother loves to have time with them, but it's been very proactive. So, in order to
Yeah.
have lifelong connection, we need to be that friend who reaches out, the one who makes the plans, the ones who puts it on the calendar. And when my friends and clients say, I'm feeling lonely, as defined by wanting more social interaction, I listen and feel that because it's very painful to be lonely and we're all lonely.
Mm.
But then
Yeah.
I ask the question, tell me about the plans that you've made. And invariably, they say, well, I'm not the one to make the plans. And then we say, aha, we each have to be the one to say, I wish I was in a book club. Okay, I'm going to start a book club. Or I can't get out of my house because now in a wheelchair. Okay, I'm going to need to get on that telephone and call somebody up and have that. So it takes quite a proactivity, and you need to sort of what I call kiss a lot of frogs.
You take me back to like my first week at university, when my son started university, I said to him, the people you meet on that first night, you're going to think, thank goodness I've made some friends, but they're probably not going to be your friends for the rest of he's just coming to the end of his 4 years now. And, those friendships changed and evolved along the way, but the people he met in the first week, I don't think there's many of them that he's still really close with now. But you
Yes.
just got to make the effort, throw yourself in. And it resonates because I work from home.
Yes.
And I'm sitting here, I'm working alone, just me and my laptop. And it did dawn on me that my levels of joy were going that way and my levels of stress were going that way. And I really consciously did connect and will now organize like groups of former colleagues getting together. I sent them a poll in our WhatsApp group the other day of what dates can you make, and just being an organizer, because it's just, as you say, so important to have those connections and switch off and laugh.
Yes, and so people can relate. You can say, "You too?" When we have these different things going on in our lives, we need other people, and it starts very, very small. So if you were going to get a cup of tea somewhere, you might just the person who comes out with the tea, you might say, "I realized that I never introduced myself. My name is
Mm.
Carrie," and that person might say, "My name is Sue." And then the next time you come in, you would say, "Hello, Sue." And then, so it's these little tiny micro
Yes.
connections that ultimately lead to the fabric, because humans are required to be sewn in a fabric with other humans.
It's one of my favorite things about Scotland, because when I walk my dog to the park and I meet other dog walkers, we stop and talk as if we've known each other all our lives. It's a very strange thing. And if I'm, walking along the path again, somebody walks by me, it's just in that kind of closed space where it's like just one on one, we'll say good morning. That's not an
Yes.
unusual thing. That's not in every culture. And it's something I really appreciate about the Scottish culture, that we do love a chat. Most of us like a
Yes.
chat.
And the research shows that it benefits our physical health, our longevity, our cognitive health. It's very important that we were made to have these back and forth interactions, both at deep levels and at meeting new people. So even introverts, even people who love to be alone, it still does matter to have time with other humans.
Beautiful. So we've got growth, we've got connection.
Yes.
Where are we going next?
We're going next to the A, and that is adapt. So something that is absolutely critical to Joyspan is the willingness and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Because, as we've said, despite our incredible efforts and all of the things we're doing, there will be change. And so it could be like me, for example, my retina detached and I lost my vision and had many surgeries. And that's part of, people have things. We all will have things. And so recognizing, yes, there will be things. And when they come, I choose to adapt to carry this thing that I didn't ask for in a way that I can still move forward. And so it may be a diagnosis, it may be a loss of a loved one. And the adapting comes from the coping literature. So there are internal and external coping strategies that have been proven to help humans adapt to things that are hard. And so in the book, I refer to them and then I list them out with the research, but then also just a checklist so you can say, have I tried this? For example, if you go to an external coping mechanism, one is just sharing that hard thing. So when our 25-year-old daughter was diagnosed with a brain tumor, I was on my knees because I did not expect that our girl, who was supposed to be heading off to medical school, was instead moving home for treatment. And your first reaction is not to adapt. Your first reaction is to shake your fist and say, no, I will not accept this.
Yes.
It's just that over time, that makes it harder because these things are realities. So the external coping mechanism was something as simple as sharing my grief. So I got myself out of being crumpled in a ball in the garage and reached out and told some trusted friends of saying, I feel awful. I don't know how to carry this. And I want to just tell you about this. I don't know what to do. And just that sharing of the pain then brings forward other people who have gone through that or something similar, and we could walk together. And there are dozens, probably hundreds of internal and external coping mechanisms. Another internal one, for example, is journaling. So you're writing about it and you're writing in a way that is processing it. You could also meet with a therapist, and that really helps a lot. You can reframe the issue. You can think, okay, in that case that I was giving, I finally had a realization she's going to be a much more compassionate doctor as a result of having been a patient. And just these conscious thoughts, not because it's easy, but the alternative is just to wallow and suffer and not adapt. And I have to say that I have seen so much suffering in my years as a gerontologist that's really the impetus for all of this is I don't want people to spend the next 40 years suffering. I want us to find ways to take what life brings to us and be able to find a way to move forward anyway.
It's that resistance, isn't it? When something that we think we don't want happens to us, and we're trying to push it away rather than work with it. And the
Yes.
harder we push, the worse it gets for us and kind of consumes us.
Yes.
I very, very much relate to that. I think that's very, very wise words. Just accepting the things that happen and learning to make the most of them, really, in whatever situation we find ourselves in. I mean, listeners and viewers and I want to know, how is your daughter doing?
She has the most beautiful name. Her name is Claire.
Oh, was a
And
great name.
it is a great name. And I am so happy to report that she still has the tumor, and yet she was able to not go to the initial school because the time of the diagnosis was such that she wasn't able to go. But after a year, was able to go to a different school. So she is in
Good,
medical school, and
good.
we beyond grateful that and it is true that she is much more empathetic, and every day she feels so grateful. So she is doing just fine, and thank you for asking.
Well, you send her my love,
I sure
from
will, from
one
Claire.
Claire to another. Yeah,
I
we have a final G in there, I think, don't we?
Yes, how well you've memorized it. So the final G is give. The research
Mm.
shows people who enjoy their longevity and maintain well-being up until their last breath are people who have recognized that they always have something to give of themselves. So, what's tricky here is that society has told us the lie that aging is all decline. And if you buy into that lie, you don't recognize all that you have to give. So,
Mm.
with giving, I want to make sure that your listeners recognize what gets better as you get older. So, when you get older, number one, you don't care so much what other people think about you, which is kind of liberating and enables you to be
Yes,
most authentically yourself. And only in my late 50s now, I'm getting this, but I can't wait to be 60 and 70 and 80 and 90. And my mom
yes,
at 97 is the most authentic version of herself. We also have improved problem solving, and the world these days has a lot of very difficult, tangled problems. And because of that, it requires older people to lean into this problem solving that comes from having solved so many problems. And so there are neurological reasons of this integration of our left and right hemisphere of our brain that comes largely from having solved thousands and thousands of problems. So when you recognize, something, maybe I don't know the latest technology, something, but I do know at 95 years old, I can come up with some great solutions and then be bold enough to put forward those solutions and to not shrink by the societal norms that tells us we have less to give. When people have older parents, the reminder there is recognize that your parents' problem solving is better than yours. And so we can learn to close our mouth and listen to older people and give them time to come up with these creative solutions. I am constantly blown away by the great solutions people come up with. And, it's daily, if I can be quiet long enough to ask somebody ahead of me in the age journey, like, what do you think we should do about this? And then I'm quiet, they come up with such really powerful creative solutions. So know your problem solving skill and be bold enough to offer it. Also, what gets better as you get older, we have the potential for greater humility, and humility is a real strength that society needs these days. We can gain a greater appreciation of music and nature and art, and a lot of these things that maybe we were too busy or too naive or too selfish to see in our younger years. So when you see what you have to give, then the second part of the equation is going ahead and giving it. So maybe you have a next door neighbor who is a single parent, and you think, something, I'm around in the evenings, like maybe if you haven't, if your spouse has passed away. So I had somebody recently go over to a next door neighbor and say, I remember when I was a young mother how dinner was such a busy time. If you have interest in this, I'd be so happy to entertain or read to the children while you fixed dinner. And in this case, it has so improved both the young mother's life, the 4 children's life,
Mm.
and my friend who is in her late 80s. So,
Oh, that's so
and
beautiful.
again, it sometimes maybe the first offer that you make won't be taken. Maybe the fifth, maybe it will take 10 times, but the world needs older people. So keep putting it out there, and then that gift to yourself of giving is incredible, but also your gift to the person that you're giving to.
Giving time, that's I always feel like I'm time starved, but I think all of us could probably find those extra minutes to go and help somebody. I think one of the things that I found most profound, I think it was Bob Proctor who said it, was something like, when you come in contact with a person, always leave them feeling better than they did before they saw you. And I think, well, that's just a beautiful statement, because if you're in a store, if you're out and about, or if you're on a telephone call with somebody who is, you would normally be letting them have it, because something's gone wrong with your gas or whatever it is, to actually take a moment and give some kindness and some credit to that person in that moment, and exchange a joke or whatever it is to lighten it. It makes such a difference to you as well as them. It's really something I try and work with a lot, is just to be kind in every situation. I do not always manage it, and the times I don't manage it, I'm walking away thinking, why did I do that? I could have handled that so differently. Sometimes our emotions run the better of us.
Yeah, I know it. And you're so right on. And as a gerontologist, I go to a ton of funerals. That's
Yeah.
part of the job. And every time I'm at a funeral, it is those beautiful moments that people, they don't say, oh, this person was in great physical health, or they had a lot of money, or they had an important title, or they had tight skin. They say, this person made me laugh. This person
Mm.
showed up for me to drive me to chemotherapy. This person saw me and saw other people. So the most important legacy that we can leave is that exactly what you're saying, like leaving each person a bit better as a result of taking the time to see them. And I think sometimes people who are, in roles where they're doing cleaning, I think sometimes people look right past as if,
Yeah.
and I think that's the most important, is like to see each human and see the beauty and the value in each human. That's our Joyspan legacy.
Yes, that was one of my first jobs, was doing housekeeping,
Yes.
and very few people tip the housekeeper. And I always say to my husband and my boys, every day we're leaving a tip for room service, because they're the ones that get ignored, because nobody sees you. They're not getting the satisfaction of having somebody go, thank you so much. So it's often
Yes.
overlooked.
Yes.
But that is a tough job. They are exactly the people that need to be tipped.
Heroes, absolute heroes.
Yes. I mean, I wonder, I'm going through great hormonal change at the moment at the age of 53. And I mean, yesterday is a classic example of, yesterday I just felt sad. And I knew it was a hormonal thing. I was tired. I've been doing a lot of cleaning over the weekend. My husband bought me this amazing cleaning device where it sort of sprays your furniture, and then you can suck the dirt out of it. I mean, I got completely carried away. I was doing it for hours, exhausted myself. Yesterday, I just felt sad, all day. And today I'm completely different. But I tried to take time yesterday. I was sitting out in the garden with my dog, and we were looking at the blossoms. And I thought, I have so much, was the thing I kept saying to myself. I have so much. And it's really true. And that always gives me a lot when I can just remind myself of that. But it feels like some people are experiencing depression. They're experiencing endless days like that. They've
Yes.
experienced a great loss. Is there something you can give them, almost like a footstep up from that? I mean, where would you go when you're in those depths of sadness?
Yes. I first would say, with people of any age experiencing depression and anxiety, that it is overwhelming and you can absolutely feel like you're drowning. And, when people and times when I have lived with depression and people said, "Oh, just be happy," you think,
Mm.
"I am going to strangle you." Like, if I could just be happy, I would.
Mm.
So I think the first is the acknowledging of how heavy it is and how much you're carrying and how valuable you are, and the fact that there is hope. And so, you know, I'm going to give a step that may be of some help. And then I'm also going to say, if you can reach out and accept that talking to somebody, either a psychologist or a psychiatrist, that it can be so valuable, both in talk therapy
Mm.
and sometimes with medication is really what we
Mhm.
need
Mhm.
physiologically, and that it's
Yes.
absolutely the opposite of a weakness. It's a strength to step in and say, "Look, I feel awful, and I don't wanna continue the rest of my decades like this." So, that's the first thing I wanna, put that out there, and then something that people have said helps, and actually the research has shown that this can be helpful, and it's so small, it almost feels like, "Well, this is so silly," but it is free, it only takes a minute, so it's worth a try. So tomorrow, when you wake up, before you even put your feet down onto the floor out of your bed, on your fingers, list out, and sometimes it can be hard to think of them, but list out 10 things that are right in a world where so many things feel wrong. So sometimes
Mm.
you think, well, begrudgingly, this pillow is soft. My bed is warm. I do like this dog lying next to me, not to mention my partner. Um, I today am going to go down and have a lovely cup of coffee. When I get down there, maybe I'll see the blossoms. I do have a conversation with somebody named Claire today, to list these things out. And it really it doesn't matter what they are, because our brains, a part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, what you draw to its attention is what you see more of. And the problem with this as humans, and I myself included, that sometimes the first thing when we wake up, you go, "Oh, my knee really hurts. My husband snored all night. I have this big bill I have to pay. My daughter is getting a divorce. My dog stinks." You go through all the things, right? And then our brains then see more of that you see what you draw attention to. For example, when you buy a new car, then suddenly you see that car everywhere you go. Or, for example, if you get a certain new pair of shoes, you see those other people with those shoes. So it's the way that our brain works. So intentionally kind of forcing yourself to draw attention to the things that you are grateful for or that are at least not wrong. So again, my mom at 97 lives with congestive heart failure and a very painful full body osteoarthritis, and she has excruciating pain. So about 20 years ago, we started this practice, having read about it, and she finds on her body things that don't hurt right when she wakes up. And because she's had every joint replaced, and she will say things like, "My nose doesn't hurt. My left ear doesn't hurt. My hair doesn't hurt." And by going through these things, there is always more right than there is wrong,
Yeah.
even in the darkest, darkest times.
That's a really nice tip. I'm gonna try that one myself the next time I have a day like yesterday.
I know, and we're gonna have those days. Like, I love that you recognize there's no human that doesn't have days that you go, and I think, "Oh, here I wrote a book about joy, and I'm feeling so without joy."
Yeah.
And that's normal, and some days I think, "Well, I'm just gonna go to bed, and maybe tomorrow will be a fresh one. And not all the time, but often you wake up in the morning, it is kind of a reset, because that's when our brains repair. And sometimes, getting overtired with getting into cleaning or whatever you're doing, sometimes you can just think, I'm going to throw in the towel today and see if tomorrow might be better.
I mean, the flip side of what we're talking about there, I've seen you talk about what you call toxic positivity, and that kind of ties into that. In that, we can see a lot of that, and we do feel with social media, especially, that we need to put our best foot forward. And I'll have weeks where I think, oh, I've got nothing to say on social media. You know,
Yes.
I'm tired. My knees hurt.
Yeah.
Here I am supposed to be talking about healthy aging, and I'm putting everything in, and I'm having a week where I'm just a bit achy and things aren't hanging together for me. So I'm not going to put anything on social media. I've got nothing to say. And that's because we think we need to be happy, happy, joy, joy all the time. And that
Right.
does create a kind of toxic positivity. What does that look like to you, toxic positivity?
Toxic positivity is awful. And I'm so glad we have a word for it and that somebody wrote a book called Toxic Positivity, because humans were never intended to be happy, happy. We then
Yeah.
wouldn't have sad and angry and bugged and ridiculous. There's a full range. And so that's why with, with the way that I conceptualize joy, it is more like an inside resource, a strength. And um, I was really moved by the work of Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And he was a physician who was incarcerated in a concentration camp. And it's a miracle that he survived. But what he wrote is that even in the absolute worst conditions, that we still have what he called like a spiritual freedom. Like inside of us, we still, regardless of all these outer parts and even how we're feeling inside there, we still have some safety. And I thought to
Mm.
myself, if a man who had endured a concentration camp could still maintain some spiritual freedom and some choice and some hope, that is also goodness in addition to the pain,
Mm.
then I can too. And my patients who have diagnoses like ALS and brain cancer and a lot of really, really hard, not happy, happy, toxic positivity things. But the reason that this matters is if we don't recognize that we still have an internal peace that is deep inside of us, then it is just succumbing to maybe 20, 30, 40 additional years of suffering. And so it's almost like suffering twice. And so I've had all these patients who, like, for example, someone I'm working with now, she said, I will never experience joy again after my husband died. He was my everything. Life is horrible. It's her choice, and I respect, that she can choose it. But I also feel sorry because I know that she's in good physical health and she's going to live 20 or 30 years of suffering day after day after day because of a choice that she made, that she's not going to access well-being. And what you decide is what you're going to be right about. So for her to say, I am not going to enjoy my life ever again, she's right. She won't. But
Yeah.
were she to decide, I'm going to do the hard work and put myself out there and say, even though I miss my best friend and my life partner, I am still alive, and as long as I'm
Mhm.
here, I would like to see if I can see the beauty in nature, to see if I could maybe help somebody's life, to hear if I could, enjoy my cup of tea. And that is less suffering, and less suffering matters. And that's what I want for people.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of us know at least one or two people in that exact situation at the moment. And it's interesting that you said it's a choice, because that's sometimes what I feel when I'm listening to people say that very thing, that they will never find happiness like that again. I feel like saying that's a choice, but it feels like that would upset them a
Yes,
lot.
we each have one life, and that's our life. So we can love other people and we want for other people not to have suffering, but ultimately, each person is the one that chooses for themselves what their lives are going to be. So we can't really say to someone else, like, you just need to choose, because maybe we can demonstrate it, maybe we can work on our own lives, but we can't actually force even our partners into a certain groove. So aging, we are all aging, and each of us starts with ourselves. And everybody wants to, quote, fix someone else. And you can love someone else, but in terms of making that choice, it's just up to the person themselves.
I want to ask you about your mom. You mentioned her earlier. I know she hasn't always had it easy, um, and yet she has chosen to see the best in life. I love that you share her through your content with us. She just seems to be wise and loving, and she has this lovely calming presence as well. She reminds me a lot of my own mum,
I was
actually.
just going to say, because we are funny because we both follow each other's mothers. And I am a big fan of your beautiful mother. And I'm so grateful that you share her with us.
It's the most wonderful thing, and you must feel similarly when people see your mother as you see her. They see the real beauty in them. And my mum has quite a following now, which is extraordinary, but she would be somebody that hadn't really sort of ever seen that in herself. It surprises
Yeah.
her. And yet she's at an age where she just says, oh, that's nice, but it doesn't affect her. She just is she's very grateful that people feel that way, but there's no ego there.
My mom too. She just laughed. I said, "Well, people watch." And she said, "Why?" And I said, and it wasn't that with my mother, it wasn't that she always had a great attitude, and it wasn't always like she wasn't a, exemplary even exerciser, or didn't have a perfect diet, and she had some alcohol and she had bad attitudes. She was far, far from perfect, but she did herself make a choice that she was going to continue to see the good in life. And yeah, the things that she did go through bankruptcy and the leukemia of a son, and she lives with congestive heart failure. And of course, her husband passed away, but none of that is unusual. That is, in fact,
Mm,
usual. And so she changed course in probably it wasn't until maybe her 80s, where she said, I am going to stop this complaining and judging and feeling, pretty sorry for myself, and just forge a different path for myself. And it has inspired people. It is changing. If we all do this, we are changing the face of aging and what it means to step into our long lives. That's pretty exciting. It feels kind of like being a
yeah.
part of a revolution.
Yeah, I'm just gonna see how far I can go with this thing
Yeah.
called life. It's
Yes.
that choice that she's made. Do
Yes.
you think that that choice has played a role in her lifespan, or how big a role do you think it's
I
playing?
guarantee it. I really guarantee it, because when you choose to lean in to grow, connect, adapt, and give, you are stimulating your brain. You're often using your body. You are
Mm,
forging these. So they are, when you do these things, it all goes in the same direction. Research shows that it lengthens your lifespan, it improves your health span, and it improves your joy span. So we're kind of lucky that these things all go in the same direction. And by doing one thing, you are helping in another area as well. And everyone's great fear is that they're going to have cognitive impairment. And so
mm,
maybe that would be a motivator for people, because the research shows that, interestingly, when you have a sense of purpose, when you feel that you have something to give, when you have more social connection, when you are adapting to things that that occur in your life, you have a reduction in rates of cognitive impairment. So maybe
Wow.
that could be a reason, if nothing else, to say you want to stay sharp. Well, then stay in the game. keep
Yeah.
keep on keeping on, as my mom says.
Great advice. I'm in a group of women on YouTube. Some of them are in the UK, some of them are in the US, and we share experience and try and help each other along. And two of them, one is in her 70s, and she is by far and above the technical whiz. I always say about her, everything she touches turns to gold. But she's still so sharp, and she's just across everything. She's got that attitude. Yes, I can. And the
Yes.
other is in her 80s, and her husband, who used to work in television, does her lighting, and he's in his 90s. And she started doing YouTube in her 80s. I just love that attitude. It's like, yes, I can, and I'm gonna give it a go.
Absolutely, because the end result is the same whether you go for the gusto or whether you don't. And so I love that. And the yes, I can is really helpful, because when we tell ourselves, I can't do that, that ship has sailed, I can't wear this, I can't, you know, then we are doing the opposite of that. We're retreating into not challenging ourselves. And when you don't challenge your brain, so when something is hard, like one of these silly technology things, like think this might take me some time, but ultimately I'm going to figure this out, and getting kind of determined. And that is something I really see with
Yes.
my mom. She will spend hours and hours with something. And she's very, very frugal. Because she grew up in the Depression. So she will, if she's overcharged by even a penny, she will find the phone number, call the store. It's quite amazing to me. And part of me thinks, oh, mom. But then I think, no, that's actually why probably her brain and her voice are so sharp,
Yeah.
is because she uses them every day.
Fantastic. Final question, because we're almost out of time. You will have seen with my parents that they have started weight training, strength training in their 80s, and it's been so phenomenal for all of us, really, the improvements that we've made, and it's brought us together and given them a new lease of life. But I'm intrigued to find out whether there is a connection between our strength and our joy span.
Yes, there is. So you think about physical strength.
Mm.
And so that is with our health span, both which impacts our bodies and our brains. And then the research shows that joy span, or you could think of it as internal strength, these variables of growing, connecting, adapting, and giving also physiologically improve our physical health and our cognition. So physical strength enables us to, for example, with your mom, the fact that she's now getting in the shower without help, she's walking faster. All of this is helping. And then when we have like, okay, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make some new connections and friends, or I'm going to that too. So we're so lucky that they go in the same direction. And
Mhm. Mm.
it's in the same way, in the opposite direction, when you're not feeling well internally with your strength, and then you're not lifting weights, that also goes in the same direction. So I encourage listeners to work on your physical strength on a daily basis. That helps your cognition. Work on your internal strength, your joy span on a daily basis, because that too. And you don't just lift one weight and think, am I strong? And in the same way, you don't just do one act of giving and think, no, it's a daily practice to continue.
Well, what a wonderful daily practice you've shared with us. Thank you so much. I really appreciate every moment of that.
Thank you very much for your work, Claire. I enjoy it very much.
Well, I hope my conversation with Dr. Kerry Burnight both reassured you that there's no need to go to extremes to age well, and inspired you to let joy lead the way. You'll find her wonderful book Joyspan linked in the description, along with other inspiring episodes that I think you'll enjoy. And do let me know in the comments what resonated most with you about this interview. If you haven't already, then hit subscribe or follow to keep up with the latest from us on the Honest channel. And if you'd like to access more from me, including regular vlogs and behind the scenes content, then you'll find a link below to join the channel as a member. And if you want a monthly dose of healthy aging inspiration delivered straight to your inbox, make sure to sign up below for my newsletter, where I share my latest episodes and articles so you don't miss out. But for now, until next time, thanks for being here today.